Speaker, question number 1.
With your permission, Mr Speaker, I will group questions 1 and 3. I established and appointed members to the Interim Public Sector Transformation Board earlier this year. A call for proposals was issued to departments, and the Interim Board has been working to assess those proposals from departments to determine which ones are transformative, and has now completed the first stage of its assessment process. 47 proposals were received in total, 29 of which are continuing to move forward. 11 of these have progressed to a Stage 2 assessment, where, having received feedback from the Interim Board, departments will submit a revised proposal by the 18th of October for a final assessment. The remaining 18 proposals have been included within a digital landscape review, allowing the Interim Board to consider these collectively and to take a more strategic, system-wide approach to digital transformation. The Department of Health has 4 proposals that are continuing to progress. 1 of those has moved to the Stage 2 assessment, and 3 are included within the digital landscape review. In due course, the Interim Board will provide advice to me on what proposals they consider to be transformational. I will then bring recommendations to the Executive for agreement.
Mr Matheson.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I thank the Minister for her answer. We understand that the £235 million will be delivered in 47 million tranches over 5 years. Can you outline whether flexibility in the profile of that funding has been agreed with Treasury to ensure that we maximise the investment over that timescale?
Thank the member for that question. And yes, obviously we're getting quite the way through the financial year at this point, and I suppose it was always going to be challenging given we had to set the board up newly this year. So I have raised that in engagement with the Chancellor and with the Chief Secretary to the Treasury to seek some flexibility in relation to that should we need it, and I anticipate that we will not spend the full 47 million this year, and we want to actually get the best bang for our buck essentially from the money that we do have. So we have to make sure that the money that is being spent on projects that are actually transformational.
Mark Durgan.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and thanks to the Minister thus far. Is it acceptable to the Minister for the NIO Permanent Secretary to sit on the Public Sector Transformation Fund Board, giving the UK Government a de facto say on key devolved spending priorities, even more of a say, some might argue, than it gives the Executive?
Minister.
Well, I don't accept that the latter point. Obviously, the Interim Board is working under the direction of the Executive. They agreed to my transformation programme proposal back at our meeting on the 9th of May. The British Government's role is primarily through having that representation on the Interim Board. And the board, as I've already outlined to Mr Matheson, its role is in relation to determining what proposals are actually transformational. It will still be for the Executive ultimately to make the decisions in relation to proposals that are recommended for funding. The role of the British Government has been set out in terms of the references in relation to it in the financial package and in correspondence from the Chief Secretary to the Treasury and Interim Fiscal Framework, and that role is to assess proposals as transformative, as I've already said, and as part of their role on the Transformation Board itself.
Jerry Kelly.
Going basis listener Sugden Ragar Guji Shaw. Thank you, Minister, for her answer up to now. As you had mentioned the digital landscape review, could you expand on that and the expected outcome of that, and will projects go ahead in the same way after that is completed?
Minister.
So just given the number of proposals that had come through from departments that were digital in nature, the Interim Board saw an opportunity to consider these collectively, allowing for a more strategic systems-wide approach to digital transformation. And therefore they recommended undertaking a digital landscape review to facilitate that. I agreed to the development of a terms of reference for the digital landscape review in my letter to the head of the Civil Service back on the 30th of August. The Executive Office has taken the lead in developing that terms of reference on behalf of the Interim Board, and will be taking this work forward with the support of my department. We're not obviously able to preempt the outcome of the review or what the interim board will advise to do based on its findings, and it will need to go through a procurement process also. The review is expected to be commissioned and concluded by the end of this year.
Steve Egan.
For remarks so far, and further to my friend Mr Durkin's comments, are we envisaging Julie Harrison to become a member of the Permanent Public Service Transformation Board, and is this enshrining the Northern Ireland office at the centre of our government?
Minister.
So, as has been set out, we appointed members to an interim board. We are working through the development of terms of reference. Everything will have to come back to the executive for decision making. And I'm very clear in my mind that the Public Sector Transformation Board, as it's constituted, relates only to the £235 million of transformation funding that was in the financial package. The terms of the financial package required the setting up of a transformation board with membership to have representation from the British Government as well as the Executive to be able to access that pot of funding. But I'm very clear that the decision making in relation to the allocation of that funding rests solely with the Executive, and I expect that will be set out in the terms of reference.
Morris Bradley.
Mr Speaker, question 2.
Minister.
All of us want to see our town centres and shopping areas thriving. The Back in Business scheme aims to bring vibrancy, footfall and investment back to our high streets while providing businesses with a boost at the start of their business journey, helping to support jobs and to bring long-term vacant units back into use. The scheme offers businesses a 50% rates discount for up to 2 years if they move into premises which were previously used for retail purposes and have been unoccupied for 12 months or more. Since the launch of the Back in Business scheme in May 2024, 18 businesses have benefited from the 50% rates discount, providing almost £41,000 in rate support. I was really pleased to visit Coleraine recently, also the members' constituency, and meet 2 businesses who have received support from the scheme. One of these businesses occupied a building which had been vacant for 10 years prior to it being able to access the scheme, and it was right in the heart of the town. So it was really encouraging to hear how the scheme is supporting new businesses while giving premises which have been vacant for a long time a new lease of life. And I would of course urge anyone who's planning to start a business or expanding their existing business to consider setting up in an empty unit and to be able to avail of the rate support on offer through Back in Business.
Mr Bradley.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I thank the Minister for her answer. But can I ask the Minister what other departments is the Department of Finance working with to promote town centres, and are these collaborations proving successful to a broader strategy to create vibrant, sustainable and economically thriving town centres? Minister.
So the member will be aware that the High Street Task Force was set up back in the last mandate, and its report and recommendations were published in March 2022. I think the taking forward or the reinstatement of the Back in Business scheme and the extension of small business rate relief were the recommendations from my department. Both of those things have obviously been implemented. I am always happy to engage with other departments. Obviously they have particular remits in relation to the specific promotion of the towns and cities and villages in terms of regeneration for the Department for Communities and the Department for the Economy in relation to its role in supporting businesses, and I am happy to engage with colleagues in relation to those.
Nicola Brogan.
Can the Minister outline what other support is available to existing businesses? Littlehill.
Minister.
Around 75% of non-domestic ratepayers get some form of rate support. Over 63% of retailers get some form of support, with 80% of this provided to small retailers through the Small Business Rates Relief Scheme, because they have NAVs of 15,000 or less. Around 30,000 businesses from our tax base of just under 75,000 businesses get small business rates relief altogether. and 4,474 manufacturers here pay the lowest business rates in these islands. They get 70% off their rates by virtue of industrial D-rating, which is a tax relief that is unique to this jurisdiction.
Colm Groth.
The Small Business Rate Relief Scheme, which did have to close for a period because this place was collapsed, should never have done so. It's a valuable source of help and assistance to businesses on our high streets, including my constituency in South Down, where many were impacted by flooding. Can the Minister advise how much money was actually paid into the department whenever the scheme closed from March 23 until it reopened in May of this year?
Minister.
That's not information I have in front of me, but I'm happy to write to the member in relation to that.
Ms Clements.
Question number 4, please.
Minister.
I am keen to see a baby loss certificate scheme taken forward as quickly as possible. This scheme will provide official recognition to parents who have suffered the tragedy of losing a baby before 24 weeks. Losses of this kind affect many families, causing very real pain and heartache. Sadly, this is often met with silence and stigma, with many parents feeling isolated in their grief. I'm determined that parents' heartache and grief is recognised, and I want to give people an opportunity to acknowledge these losses, perhaps for the first time for some, in order to bring some comfort to their suffering. I met with the Health Minister in September to receive an update on progress from the General Register Office officials in my department, who are working closely with the Department of Health officials on how the baby loss scheme may be developed, learning from the equivalent schemes in England and Scotland. This work is continuing at pace. I have instructed my officials to put the required legislation in place to provide a statutory footing for a scheme here, and they are working to include a baby loss certificate scheme in the Deaths and Stillbirth Registrations Bill, which is currently under development.
Ms Clements.
I thank the Minister for her answers, and just to acknowledge that this has now been brought forward in legislation, I think is crucially important, so I'm grateful for that too. Minister, can you advise then, will the scheme be going out to public consultation?
Minister.
Well, it's very important to me that the baby loss certificate scheme meets the needs of families, charities and third sector organisations, and I'm sure, like myself, she has had a lot of correspondence in relation to this issue, and it has touched many people already that we are keen to develop and progress a baby loss certificate scheme. So as that legislation is developed, we will consider how best to shape the proposed scheme around the needs and expectations of those who will be accessing it.
Justin McNulty.
Minister, last week was Baby Loss Awareness Week. A painful reminder that parents who lose their baby during pregnancy will feel every year. Can you guarantee that by the time of the next Baby Loss Week next year, the Baby Loss Certificate Scheme and any accompanying legislation will be implemented?
So I have directed officials in GRO to include in the drafting of the Deaths and Stillbirth Registrations legislation that is currently being brought forward to put the ability to register online and by phone deaths and stillbirths into permanent legislation. We will include within that the necessary legislation to put in place to provide for a baby loss certificate scheme. We may have to go to public consultation, and that might be the right thing to do in terms of getting the views of people who would be accessing the scheme, and with them the intention would be to bring forward secondary regulations. I want to do that as quickly as possible. That's my commitment to do that as quickly as possible, and I wouldn't want to nail my colours to the mast in terms of saying we'll definitely have it by next October, but certainly it would be my intention that we will do so, because I think it's something that is an assembly that we are all collectively committed to and want to see delivered as quickly as possible. But obviously we have to go through the appropriate processes and allow the legislation to proceed, and any consultation that might have to be carried out, but I will be committed to delivering it as quickly as I can.
Question 5.
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, with your permission, I will answer questions 5 and 11 together. Over 1,400 responses were received from ratepayers, businesses and a range of other stakeholders. It was for that reason that I wanted to ensure I took the time with my officials to carefully examine all the views from those who responded. I will be engaging with executive colleagues on the next steps and will continue my engagement with business bodies, organisations and wider society to work together to build a progressive rate system which grows our tax base and stimulates our economy. As part of that work, I have now presented short, medium and long-term rating policy proposals, including a more strategic, longer-term policy approach to the Executive for consideration. It is obviously my intention to make a statement to the Assembly after the Executive has agreed the way forward.
And I thank the Minister for her response and her efforts in this regard. Can I ask the Minister more specifically if she's able to give an update in relation to industrial derating?
So I spoke on this issue a number of times in the Assembly because I recognise the role that industrial derating has and the measures that it has played in supporting the 4,400 plus manufacturers and its contribution to a strong manufacturing sector here. The measure supports Indigenous businesses, with over 50% of the recipients being eligible for small business rates relief, valuation the threshold of 15,000 NAV. Anything that I and the Executive does in relation to our rating policy has to, in my view, align very much with what we are trying to achieve with our economic vision in terms of creating good jobs, improving productivity, decarbonisation and regional balance.
Danny Donnelly.
The Minister for her answer so far. In my constituency of East Antrim and town centres, despite hard-working businesses, we have had a proliferation of vacant premises. I would like to ask the Minister if she would agree with me that high street businesses are getting an unfair deal from the current rating system, and to ask what can be done to make competition from online shopping, where renting rates are much less, and to make it more fair to protect town centre businesses.
Minister.
I think that there have been a number of factors at play that have impacted on our towns, cities and village centres over recent years, not least obviously the proliferation of online shopping, and it's just so handy for so many people to choose to that. So I think there is a collective approach that we need to take as an executive in terms of supporting our towns and high streets. And when I engage with businesses and business organisations, they will outline the number of pressures they are facing across a lot of fronts, and costs that have increased very significantly in general terms, and rates is just one of the many bills that they receive. It's obviously important also to recognise that rates is our major source of income generation, and anything that we want to do in relation to giving support or rate relief, we have to recognise that that's money that either isn't there to be spent in public services, or that will increase the rates bill for everybody else as well. So that's the balance that we have to get in relation to the rating system. We want to obviously stimulate our economy, but we also need to be able to fund our public services.
Sinead McLaughlin.
Thank you, Minister, for your answers. In the Budget Sustainability Plan, you have explored raising rates this year from 2.5 to 4%. Given the increases that ratepayers have seen in both their regional and district rates, and even in your response to the previous question, rates are increasing and services are decreasing. Can you commit that we will not be putting the burden onto our ratepayers for the rest of the mandate, based on your previous answer as well?
Minister.
And I think that what the Budget Sustainability Plan reflects is the amount that would have to be raised through the regional rate if to meet the obligation that we have in relation to the 113 million that needs to be raised over the course of the 2 years. And obviously the decision that the Executive took last year in relation to keeping the increase in relation to regional rate in line with inflation was to do exactly as the member has outlined, it was to mitigate the impact that would be felt by households and businesses, and that was despite the pressure that we were getting from Treasury in relation to their demands in terms of revenue raising. I think that that's a good, strong argument. We have to get that balance right, as I reflected to Mr Donnelly, in terms of being able to fund public services and to ensure that the burden doesn't fall too hard on too many people.
Anya Murphy.
Question 6, please.
So the Budget Sustainability Plan is a first step on the Executive's journey towards fulfilling our longer-term ambition of integrating sustainability discussions into the heart of our processes and decision-making. The Executive, as part of the plan, has agreed to a future work plan that includes the development and implementation of 5-year departmental financial sustainability plans. Work is ongoing to finalise the full content of the future work plan. However, it is envisaged that these 5-year plans will become a rolling programme of work with departments. In parallel, my officials will also look to take forward the development and implementation of a budget improvement plan. It is important to state that the Budget Sustainability Plan in and of itself will not address all the fiscal problems that we are currently facing as an executive. It provides us with a strategic framework to work together as an executive to develop and introduce fiscally sustainable policies to deliver the level of public services that our citizens deserve. Individual ministers must now begin addressing the overcommitments in the current year and taking steps to live within budget. This work, however, needs to be underpinned by a new approach from the British Government, which sees proper investment in public services and infrastructure, and the budget at the end of October is the opportunity for them to signal this intention.
Ms Murphy.
I'd like to thank the Minister for her answer. Minister, how does the Budget Sustainability Plan address some of the issues that the Executive is currently facing?
Minister.
Well, the Budget Sustainability Plan isn't, and it was never intended to be, a panacea for addressing all of the fiscal issues that the Executive is currently facing. Rather, it's that first step in a financial sustainability journey, providing a strategic framework that will allow departments to consider how they can deliver long-term sustainable public services and everything that's required for them to be able to do that. I hope that people will take confidence in the work that has already taken place, and that the strategic framework will enable further work on longer-term departmental plans and a strategic budget improvement plan. These will contribute to the delivery of efficient and effective public services and the long-term fiscal stability that our citizens and those who are accessing public services so rightly expect.
Leanne Forsyth.
And I thank the Minister for her answers so far. The Budget Sustainability Plan is obviously based on the plan for a balanced budget for the 24-25 year, with her recent announcement of the £769 million of overcommitment for the year, and us still waiting to hear the outcomes of the monitoring rounds. Is she confident that the 24-25 year budget can be balanced?
Minister.
I think that I've certainly made it no secret how difficult the financial situation is, particularly for this year. And I think it will still be a challenge for departments to live within budget. As I suppose we've already outlined in contributions to the Assembly, we anticipate a significant amount of Barnett consequentials for the rest of this year. That will help to offset the overcommitments that departments are currently projecting, but there is obviously still work that needs to be done and taken by individual departments to address that. I think it's also important to put on record that the problems that the Executive faces this year and also in previous years are the consequences of the chronic underfunding of our public services by successive British governments. We did get the interim fiscal framework agreed, and because of that we had the 24% increase to the needs-based factor codified, and that has obviously provided us with some additional funding this year, but it is still going to be a challenge to live within budget.
Owen Tennyson.
Speaker, and thank you, Minister, for those answers so far. Minister, do you agree that whilst any executive department is reporting an overcommitment, they should not be committing to additional discretionary spend? And what steps can you take as Minister to ensure that that situation does not arise again?
I do agree with the member that that addressing overcommitments should be the top priority for any minister and living within their budget. Obviously, all ministers are autonomous within their own departments and that they have to take decisions to live responsibly. But I think that the consequences of any department overspending this year are dire for the executive as a whole, in relation to the fact that the overcommitted funding would come off next year's budget and would also put into question the write-off of the £559 million of what the Treasury called debt from previous years. So I think that it's incumbent on all ministers to take the decisions that are necessary to live within their budget and not put the executive in that position.
Mr. Speaker, Minister, with the greatest respect, the budget sustainability plans waffle. Most of the text is simply summarising actions that are obvious anyway, such as seeking multi-year budgets, and that is with, honestly, the greatest respect. But in Appendix D, there are some tables which are interesting, which are the options for revenue raising of the £113 million. One of them includes £6 million on car parking charges and points out that delaying the implementation of the Hospital Car Parking Charges Act will realise £6 million of savings and therefore revenue. So is it the position of you and your department that you are counting as a revenue-raising measure delaying a piece of private members' legislation which one of your colleagues brought in?
Mr. O'Toole, are you going to ask a question? Minister.
Well, I don't obviously agree with the member's interpretation of the Budget Sustainability Plan. Annex D is a list of potential proposals from departments. The executive will take a decision and ministers within each of their own departments will take decisions as to which of those that they take forward.
Deborah Erskine.
Speaker, question number 7.
Minister.
With the Speaker's permission, I will answer questions 7 and 12 together. I am continuing to push for the reversal of the British Government pause on the growth deal funding. My officials are working closely with the 2 growth deal teams to provide the necessary evidence for Treasury to consider as part of the spending review. During the Finance and Interministerial Standing Committee meeting on the 3rd of October, I raised with the Chief Secretary to the Treasury the importance of the growth deals to our economic development and reiterated the need for the funding to be reinstated for the Causeway Coast and Glens and Mid-South West growth deals. I am also pleased to advise that at its meeting on the 2nd of October, the Executive agreed to recommendations I brought forward, asking it to reaffirm its funding commitments to the 2 growth deals and the £100 million complementary fund. While we continue to collectively press the Treasury for the reversal of its decision to pause the £162 million British Government funding contribution to the growth deals, the Executive's agreement to reaffirm its funding commitment should help provide clarity amidst the confusion caused by Treasury, especially, and I know the member will be pleased about this, in relation to the A4 Enniskillen bypass, which is currently out to tender.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Minister and I thank the Executive for what they have been doing in relation to Mid-South West growth deal and indeed the Causeway Coast and Glens growth deal as well. This is an economic game changer and a catalyst, and I appreciate she will have some vested interest in this as well for her area. What is her assessment of NIO's willingness and ability to be able to effectively lobby on this issue and ensure that money is drawn down and that pause is lifted, because this is vital for these 2 council areas. We have a situation in which 2 council areas are missing out here. What is her assessment of NIO's ability to do this?
And I think that the very strong collective message that we have been able to send as an executive and parties across the board in relation to the need to unpause the funding commitment to the growth deals has been a real strength. I know that the deal partners have been engaging directly with the NIO. I think they met with the British Secretary of State last week, and I think that they were reassured by their engagement. That's some of the feedback that I have received. Other members may have had similar feedback, but I think there is still work to do, and certainly I have been encouraging the deal partners, and I will be meeting with Mid-South West deal again later this week to continue to put that pressure on and for us to use whatever avenue that we have. And I have continued to press with Treasury in particular to ensure that this commitment is reinstated.
Jan Dodds.
Speaker, and thank you, Minister. We do appreciate the work that has gone into trying to get these deals back on track. The Mid-South West deal was actually due to be signed with heads of agreement on this Wednesday, and that shows how far we were really along the line of this. Will you be accompanying the councils to London next weekend to lobby parliamentarians in relation to the issues around the deal, and what other suggestions have you to keep this alive so that the government know precisely how important this is?
About 10 seconds to answer this.
Well, I haven't been invited to London next week, but I would be happy to attend with them. I will be, as I says to Deborah, meeting with Mid-South West deal again this week, and I think we all have avenues that we can use in terms of our lobbying, and I will use my specific relationship with Treasury.
Thank you. Now we move to topical questions, and I call Matthew O'Toole.
Minister, earlier this year we were told that delaying the June monitoring round by just a few days would have catastrophic consequences. Further to that, can I ask when we will see the October monitoring round?
Minister.
Well, I was going to say in October. So when I met with the Chief Secretary to the Treasury at the Fisc last week, the week before, there was an indication that rather than having to wait until January, which is usual to get clearer confirmation on Barnett consequentials for the year, that there would be substantive clarity in relation to that on the 30th of October when the British Chancellor announces the budget. And therefore, October monitoring has been commissioned. We will see the outcome of the budget and seek to make allocations in relation to that then.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If I'm to divine from that, Minister, that it won't happen in all likelihood in October, two things flow from that. Either what was said earlier this year, that monitoring rounds had to happen in the literal month and could not be delayed for major things like budgets or indeed general elections. Either that was wrong in June to say that, as was said by yourself and by officials, or it is the case that these things can be delayed. Either way, can you clarify why one was wrong and the other isn't?
I don't think that's what was said by either myself or officials. I think what was said was that we wanted to give departments clarity on their funding allocations as quickly as possible so that they were able to make decisions or to not make decisions that would have been detrimental to the services that they delivered, and that is why there was an urgency in relation to June monitoring. I, by the way, feel that there is still that urgency in relation to making allocations, and I would prefer to do it as soon as possible, but if we are getting substantive clarity on the total amount of Barnett consequentials that we are getting for the rest of the year on the 30th of October, to me it makes sense that we would wait to that point in time and then be able to give departments as clear certainty as possible.
Question 2 is withdrawn. I call Gary Middleton.
Speaker, Minister, you'll be aware that many businesses at this minute in time are dealing with challenging environments and rising costs. That is exacerbated within my own constituency of Foyle, actually in Foyle Street in the city centre, where ongoing water and sewage works are taking place and could take place now for up to a year. Can the Minister provide any support to those businesses who are affected?
Sure.
Yeah, and I think that the member has corresponded with me on this issue also, and I do recognise that sometimes when there are public groundworks taking place that there is inconvenience for businesses, so I will always consider cases put forward on relief on their individual merits, and members should be aware that this will always be done in the context that, as I outlined to Mr Donnelly earlier, that when we award relief for a specific purpose, that is therefore less money we have to spend on public services, or it means higher rates bills for other homes and businesses. Under the rating and valuation system, every case is assessed by the LPS on its own merits by considering the impacts of the work on the NAV of the property. This is determined by established case law and a long-standing statutory framework that supports the stability of a tax base used to fund both central and local government services.
Mr Middleton.
Can I thank the Minister for her response? I suppose, Minister, in terms of actual action for the businesses, and I welcome your comments, would the Minister maybe commit to working closely with the Council to see what can be done? I know that one business talks about 40% reduction in footfall over the weekends. That's something which isn't sustainable in the long term. So will the Minister commit to working closely with the Council to try and provide some support?
LPS is aware that the ongoing works in Foyle Street are affecting, I think it's up to 29 properties, and they are currently dealing with applications from 2 businesses in relation to those works. Obviously, we would encourage businesses to engage with LPS, and I would be happy for officials to work with council officials to see what the impact is.
Does the Minister think it's appropriate to be meeting the LCC on matters of public policy?
Minister.
No, I don't think it's appropriate to meet the LCC to discuss issues of public policy. We are 26 years on from the Good Friday Agreement, so there is no place in this society for paramilitary groups. There is no role for paramilitary groups. There is no excuse for the continued existence of those groups. And despite the work of the PSNI's Paramilitary Crime Task Force and the Tackling Paramilitary Programme, these paramilitary groups do continue to exist. The tolerance of these groups is indefensible and it must be called out.
Mr. Sheehan.
Would the Minister agree with me that the only reason anyone should be meeting these groups is to tell them to leave the stage?
Minister.
Yes, I fully agree that the only issue that needs to be discussed with the LCC is the ending of paramilitarism and the ending of anti-community criminality, which criminal gangs engage in. The recent meetings between DUP ministers and the LCC provides political cover and implicit justification to these groups, and I think that's unacceptable.
Before asking this question, I'd like to declare an interest in relation to my husband's family live along the A5. So, Minister, I thank you for your answer so far, but it is just in relation to the purchasing and acquiring of land for road development. Can you outline the criteria for this?
I don't have the information that the member is seeking in front of me, but I'm happy to correspond if she wants to write to me on that specific issue.
Thank you. What has come up time and time again with landowners is the purchasing of land for developmental versus agricultural, and that is a key concern of landowners who live along the A5. Is that something that will be a consideration of her department going forward for other road infrastructure projects?
Minister.
So I would be happy for the member to engage with the LPS officials, obviously, who lead on that particular area of work in relation to this. So if you correspond with me, I can facilitate that.
Cathy Mason.
Can I ask the Minister for an update on her plans to reform marriage legislation?
Minister.
So members will be aware of my intention to bring forward a bill to amend the current law on marriage and civil partnership. These important reforms will bring belief marriage within the statutory framework and increase the minimum age for marriage and civil partnership from 16 to 18. I'm pleased that the Executive approved these proposals at its meeting on the 26th of September. My officials have finalised instructions to the Office of Legislative Counsel, and drafting work is now underway.
Ms. Mason.
And thank the Minister for that answer. Minister, can I ask, when do you expect a bill to be ready for consideration by the Assembly?
Minister.
So currently, the Marriage and Civil Partnership Bill is earmarked as a Year 2 bill, so it will be introduced during the 25-26 session. I'm hoping that the bill will be ready for consideration before then, and that we might be able to introduce it earlier than currently scheduled, depending obviously on competing drafting resources. I would hope that the bill will be ready for consideration by the Assembly before next summer and before the official start of the Year 2 session.
Anya Murphy.
Minister, has there been any further clarity on additional Barnett consequentials to be received this year?
Minister.
So, at the meeting of the FISC back the week before last, as I said in my earlier answers, the Chief Secretary of the Treasury gave an indication that we would have substantive clarity in relation to the total amount of Barnett consequentials that we're getting for the rest of the year at the budget on the 30th of October. Previous indications from Treasury officials through engagement with my department officials put that in the region of about 500 million, which is obviously a significant amount of money, but when it's set against the overcommitments that current departments are currently projecting, it is clearly still going to be a challenge for us.
Ms Murphy.
I'd like to thank the Minister for her answer. Minister, how soon do you intend to allocate these additional funds?
So, as I mentioned in one of my earlier answers, it would be my intention that we will allocate this money as part of October monitoring round. The timing obviously has been revised to allow departmental allocations to be informed by the outcome of the autumn budget.
Nigel.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Could I ask the Minister to outline the timetable for the budget 2025-2026 process, please?
Minister.
Yeah, I don't have the timetable exactly in front of me, but I'll do it from memory. So we'll get the British Chancellor announcing her budget on the 30th of October. We will then obviously engage in developing the Executive's budget based on that. Departments have already submitted their projections for the next 3 years. That was commissioned back a number of months ago. So we have their information, I suppose, ready to go in relation to that once we have the total amount confirmed. And it would be my intention to be doing a budget sometime probably early December, and then it will go out for consultation, a full consultation, which obviously we weren't able to do this year.
Ms Nicholl.
Thank you, and I thank the Minister for her response. Does the Minister believe that this budget will better reflect the funding needed to mitigate against climate change, particularly including more funding for the Lough Neagh Action Plan?
Sure.
So obviously each individual minister will make their pitch for what they think is the priority within the department. We are also in the position now that we have a draft programme for government out for consultation, and that will shape the allocation of funding also. And obviously climate change and our obligations under the Climate Change Act have to be a priority for every single minister, and the decisions that are taken in how they spend money. We are also, part of the work that my department is doing in relation to the budget improvement plan is going to look at issues more widely than just how we spend our money, but how we, for example, do gender budgeting or green budgeting and other issues that can be applied to that process.
Mr Crawford's not in his place. I call Robbie Butler.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I'm glad I was in the chamber. I asked the Minister a couple of weeks ago with regard to management companies and their impact, and the Minister's department was good enough to write back to me, but I'm not sure that we're any further forward, and the problems with regard to those management companies seems to be growing. Can the Minister give an update on any changes?
Minister.
So it is an issue that I have had quite a bit of correspondence on, and I know that a number of members are concerned about. Obviously, it's a complex area of law, and one that we do not have the expertise currently within my department to properly develop the type of policy proposals that we would need. I met with the department or the Minister for Communities last week on another issue and raised this with him and our officials. He's happy for our officials to work together. I think it is something that we need to look at how we can progress, and I have asked my officials to do that.
Mr Butler.
Thank the Minister for her answers. There's some legislation that's making passage in Westminster. Certainly there was a white paper that was produced. I believe the Labour government are going to bring that through. Would the Minister, through her department, work with the UK government in regards to that? And if we don't have the facility and recourse here, could we expedite that by tabling something at Westminster?
Minister.
One of I suppose the ways that we want to move forward in this is to look at what is happening in other jurisdictions, because there are different, legislative frameworks, and that would be part of the policy development work. So I would be happy to engage with officials in relation to that.
Thank you. Joanne Bunting has given notice of an urgent oral concludes questions to the Minister. Thank you.